as can be expected, you know, the current media spectacle is in regards to Obama's speech that he's going to give to school children, supposedly. And this is just another bread and circus moment in our entire media spectrum, not just on national television, in schools, but also the blog wars going on. And it is essentially a complete sideline which distracts from major issues. And we're not just talking about healthcare, the so-called healthcare reform debate, which is basically concluded at this point, in case you haven't noticed. So all this shouting and yelling was essentially about nothing, because the status quo is to be maintained at all cost. And so, you know, I was just wondering, when is the next war supplemental bill going to be on the table? Because it's apt to come about pretty soon, since Obama is following in the very same footsteps as his predecessors. And this is not just George W. Bush, but it goes way back in terms of our U.S. foreign policy. So now the generals in Afghanistan, the U.S. generals, NATO generals, are calling for a re-evaluation of tactics and strategy in that country, when any thinking person at this point knows that this has nothing to do with terrorism, nuclear arms, or anything like that. It is all about money, oil, and pipelines. This is what it's all about. And so yeah, there's going to be an escalation, more troops, you know, just unending defense spending. And so how are you going to bring a budget deficit under control if the next supplemental bill is just automatically being signed? You know, this is all on automatic pilot at this point. So I'd like to recommend a book to you. It's called Packing Inferno: The Unmaking of a Marine. It's written by Tyler Boudreau, a former U.S. Marine who served in Iraq and long before that. And it's a brilliantly written book and account of his assessment of our ongoing wars and his experience in that particular war. There is the dust jacket of the book says, "This bravely truthful book is urgently needed cure for America's chosen blindness about the war to which this nation condemns its young." And I'll read you a small little excerpt, and I'll also point a link to that book. It deals all with the war in Iraq, but not just the war in Iraq, but essentially U.S. foreign policy as a whole, and how one person and others experience this, the rage and the hatred that is instilled, and the complete unreality when you come home from a war like that, which engulfs you to where nobody in the American public even understands either, number one, what this war was all about, number two, what these people have gone through in terms of their experiences. It's quite a read, let me tell you, and I wouldn't recommend it for nighttime reading, but I would certainly recommend it for any young person out there who even is contemplating on joining the armed services today. So what do you think about this war? People always ask me, the author says, almost as often as I ask myself. And I've stewed it in a crock pot of sleepless nights 1,000 times over and it always comes out the same. A crock pot full of shitty stew. What is war to me, and who am I to the war? How do I talk about this thing, and who is going to listen? When I was a kid, I watched an ad for a set of Vietnam history books. A guy, a vet, came on and relayed his story about coming home. He said, I got into a cab and told the driver I just got back home from Vietnam. And the driver said, so? After Iraq, I came home and got that same line. But instead of straight up, not giving a rat's ass, people would give me the glassy-eyed smile and say shit like, wow, man. So I got the picture real fast. If my story wasn't tragic enough, if it didn't make them cry right away, and if it didn't yank them to the edge of their seats or got a big laugh, nobody wanted to hear it. They didn't want to hear the dry particulars. They wanted high-speed adventures and witty heroes who escaped death by the skins of their teeth and saved the day in the end. Well, I'm not that kind of hero, and I don't have that kind of story to tell. But I thought, I'm a writer, goddammit. So I said to myself, I can come up with something. I mean, shit, I just went through a war. There's got to be a tale to tell in all of that carnage. So I'll post a link to this book, perhaps some of the reviews. Everyone should very definitely read this to understand the situation that returning vets are in, and also the situation of the locals in Iraq or elsewhere, because it is very much a moral question. It's not just one of strategy. Thanks for listening.